I was sold at 18 to a stranger who didn't want me, but his children loved me before he ever could. This is my story. From the auction block to a home I never expected. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The sun was merciless that August afternoon, beating down on the wooden platform like a punishment from above. Elena Ward stood there with her hands clasped in front of her worn cotton dress, trying to hold on to the last shreds of her dignity while dozens of eyes crawled over her like insects. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the town square, a theatrical barker turning human desperation into entertainment. 18 years old, healthy, strong, can cook, clean, and mend. No family debts transfer with purchase. Elena's jaw clenched. No family debts. That was the selling point, the reason she was here. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving behind nothing but whiskey bottles and I owe us that stretched across 3 counties. The bank had taken their house, the general store had taken their furniture, and now the final creditor, a thin-lipped man named Dalton, who ran the town's largest mercantile, had decided to recoup his losses by putting her on this platform. It wasn't technically legal, everyone knew that, but this was frontier Colorado in 1882, where the law bent easy for men with money and broke completely for girls with none. Do I hear $50? Elena forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. Don't cry. Don't show them fear. Her mother had died when she was 12, and in those last fevered hours she'd gripped Elena's hand and whispered, "Whatever happens, baby girl, you keep your spine straight. You hear me? Straight." Elena's spine was straight now, rigid. If she relaxed even a fraction, she'd collapse. The crowd was a blur of faces, ranch hands with tobacco-stained teeth, shop owners with calculating eyes, and a few women who looked at her with something between pity and contempt. One man in the front, a heavy-set cattle buyer named Morrison, was grinning. Elena had seen that grin before, directed at Sally Jenkins, who worked at the saloon. Sally had warned her once, "Men like Morrison don't buy women to clean their houses, honey." $50, Morrison called out, his voice thick with something that made Elena's skin crawl. The auctioneer pointed at him with theatrical flair. "50 from Mr. Morrison. Do I hear 60? Silence. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard stories about Morrison's ranch, about the help he hired, and how they rarely stayed more than a few months before disappearing to other towns, other territories, their eyes hollow, and their spirits broken. 50 going once! Elena's eyes darted across the crowd, desperate, searching for, what? A miracle? Those didn't exist. Not for girls like her. 50 going twice! She closed her eyes. Maybe if she pretended hard enough, she could be somewhere else. The meadow behind their old house, maybe, where she and her mother used to pick wildflowers. Before the sickness, before the debts, before everything turned to ash. Wait. The voice came from the back of the crowd, quiet but carrying. Elena's eyes snapped open. A man stood there, separate from the pack, one hand raised. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out a simple work shirt. His face was weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors, with deep lines around his eyes and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same granite that jutted from the nearby mountains. His hair was dark, streaked with early silver at the temples, despite the fact that he couldn't have been much past 35. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as a winter sky, and just as cold. He wasn't looking at her the way Morrison was. In fact, he wasn't looking at her at all. His gaze was fixed somewhere over the auctioneer's head, his jaw set in what looked like grim resignation. $60, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. The auctioneer's eyes lit up with greedy delight. 60 from Mr. Hale! Mr. Do I hear 70? Morrison's grin had vanished. He turned to glare at the man, Hale, with naked hostility. 70, he spat. 80. Hale's response was immediate, still in that same dead tone, like he was negotiating for a plow, not a person. Morrison's face reddened. 90! 100, the crowd murmured. $100 was serious money, a quarter of what a decent horse cost, more than most men earned in 3 months. Morrison looked like he wanted to bid again, but his companion, a wiry ranch hand, leaned over and whispered something urgent in his ear. Morrison's mouth twisted into an ugly shape, but he didn't raise his hand again. The auctioneer scanned the crowd, his voice rising with showman's enthusiasm. $100. Do I hear 110? 100 going once, going twice. He slammed his gavel down with a crack that made Elena flinch. Sold! To Marcus Hale! Just like that, it was over. Elena Ward, daughter of James Ward and Catherine Ward née Sullivan, had been sold for the price of a good plow horse. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them to hold. Straight spine. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Straight spine, baby girl. Dalton, the mercantile owner who'd arranged this whole spectacle, appeared at her elbow with a satisfied smirk. Off you go, then. Mr. Hale's a respectable rancher, Ward. You could have done much worse. His eyes flicked to Morrison, who was shoving his way out of the crowd. Much worse. Elena descended the platform on shaking legs. The crowd parted for her like she was diseased, their entertainment now concluded. She could feel their eyes on her back, judging, pitying, already forgetting. Marcus Hale hadn't moved from his position at the rear of the square. As she approached, escorted by Dalton like property being delivered, she got her first clear look at him. Up close, he was even more imposing, not just tall, but solidly built, with the kind of strength that came from years of hard labor. His hands, hanging loose at his sides, were scarred and calloused, a working man's hands. But it was his face that troubled her most. It wasn't cruel. She'd learned to recognize cruelty in the months since her father's death, in the faces of creditors and neighbors who'd turned their backs. Hale's face was worse than cruel. It was empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside and left just the shell. Here she is, Marcus, Dalton said cheerfully, as if they were concluding a pleasant business transaction. Healthy as advertised. You've got yourself a good bargain. Hale's gray eyes finally dropped to Elena's face. The look lasted maybe 3 seconds, a flat, assessing glance, before he turned back to Dalton. I need a receipt. Of course, of course. Dalton produced a pre-written document from his jacket. Just need your signature. Standard contract. She's bound to your service for a period of no less than 3 years in exchange for room, board, and reasonable care. All legal and proper. Elena's stomach churned. 3 years. She was contracted to this silent stranger for 3 years. Hale took the paper without reading it and signed his name in quick, harsh strokes. His handwriting was surprisingly neat, the hand of a man with at least some education. He handed it back to Dalton along with a roll of bills that he pulled from his shirt pocket. Dalton counted it with obvious pleasure. Pleasure doing business, Marcus. You need anything else? You know where to find me. Hale said nothing. He just turned and started walking toward the edge of the square, where a wagon and 2 horses waited. After 3 steps, he paused and looked back at Elena, as if suddenly remembering she existed. You coming or not? It wasn't a question, not really. Elena glanced back at the town square, at the platform where she'd been sold, at the dispersing crowd, at the town that had once been her home and was now just a place full of ghosts. She had no money, no family, nowhere to go. She followed him. The wagon was functional but well-maintained, the horses healthy and calm. Hale climbed up onto the driver's seat without offering to help her. Elena gathered her skirts and pulled herself up onto the bench beside him, her small canvas bag, containing literally everything she owned, clutched in her lap. He clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. They moved through the town in silence, past the church and the saloon and the general store where she used to buy penny candy with her mother, past the boarding house where she'd been staying, crammed into a room with 2 other women and barely able to afford the weekly rent, past all the life she'd known. The silence stretched and stretched. Elena's hands gripped her bag so tightly her knuckles went white. She should say something. Thank him, maybe? For saving her from Morrison? But the words stuck in her throat, and the rigid set of Hale's shoulders didn't invite conversation. They left the town behind. The road became a dirt track winding through golden grass and scattered pine trees, the mountains rising in the distance like sleeping giants. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Elena found her voice. How far is it? To your ranch? Hale didn't look at her. Another hour, Another silence. Elena tried again. I should thank you for... Don't. The word was sharp enough to cut. Elena's mouth snapped shut. I didn't do it for you, Hale continued, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. I did it because I need someone to take care of my kids, and you were the only option that wasn't going to rob me blind or run off in the night. Don't make it into something it's not. The words landed like slaps, each one stinging more than the last. Elena felt her face heat with humiliation and anger. I wasn't trying to... You'll have your own room. You'll cook, clean, and watch the children. You'll get 3 meals a day and clothes when you need them. The work's hard but fair. You stay for the 3 years in the contract, and then if you want to leave, you can leave. That's the arrangement. That's all it is. Elena bit down hard on her tongue to keep from saying something she'd regret. This was her life now. For 3 years, maybe longer if she had nowhere else to go. And this cold, distant man was her, what? Owner? Employer? The word husband flickered through her mind unbidden, and she shoved it away violently. This wasn't a marriage. This was a transaction. I understand, she said quietly. Good. They didn't speak again. The sun sank lower, the shadows lengthening across the grassland. The track climbed gradually, winding through stands of aspen that gleamed gold and white in the fading light. Elena had never been this far from town before. It felt like traveling to the edge of the world. Then, as they crested a low ridge, she saw it. The ranch spread across a wide valley, backed by the dark wall of mountains. The main house was 2 stories, built from logs with a wide front porch, larger and more substantial than she'd expected. There was a barn, a stable, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle dotted the valley floor, small as toys at this distance. It was a real ranch, a successful one, by frontier standards. It's big, Elena said, unable to help herself. Hale's expression didn't change. It's work. They descended into the valley as dusk gathered. Up close, Elena could see that the ranch, while prosperous, had a slightly unkempt quality. Gardens overgrown, porch steps in need of repair, windows that could use a good washing. The mark of a house without a woman's hand, her grandmother would have said. Or maybe just the mark of a man who'd stopped caring about anything beyond the bare necessities. Hale pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house and climbed down. This time he did offer her a hand, a brief, impersonal grip, before turning toward the house. "Samuel!" he called out. "Kids?" The front door opened, and an older man emerged onto the porch. He was lean and grizzled, probably in his 60s, with a tobacco-stained beard and shrewd eyes that took Elena's measure in a single glance. "This is her?" he asked Hale. "This is her. Elena Ward, this is Samuel Yates. He runs the ranch hands and keeps the place from falling apart." Samuel nodded at her. "Ma'am?" His tone was neutral, waiting to see what she was before committing to an opinion. "Where are Owen and Clara?" Hale asked, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. "In the barn, last I saw, playing in the hayloft." Samuel's eyes flickered with something that might have been amusement. "They know something's happening. Been wound up all day." Hale's jaw tightened. "I'll get them. Samuel, show Miss Ward to the spare room, the one upstairs on the north side." He strode off toward the barn without another word, leaving Elena alone with Samuel. The older man gestured toward the house. "Come on then, I'll get you settled." The inside of the house was surprising. Elena didn't know what she'd expected, maybe a dark bachelor's hovel. But while it was clearly under-maintained, the bones of it were solid and even beautiful. The main room had a large stone fireplace, comfortable furniture worn from use, and wide windows that would let in good light during the day. There was a dining table large enough for 8, a kitchen area with a good iron stove, and stairs leading up to the second floor. "Used to be nicer," Samuel said, watching her take it all in. Marcus's wife, Margaret, she had a touch for making a place feel like home, but that was, well, that was before. Elena wanted to ask before what, but Samuel was already climbing the stairs. She followed, her bag bumping against her leg. The second floor had 4 bedrooms opening off a central hallway. Samuel led her to the farthest one and pushed open the door. "This'll be yours. It's clean, at least. Margaret's sister stayed here sometimes, so there's bedding and such." The room was simple but adequate. A narrow bed with a faded quilt, A small dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the valley. After the boarding house room with its 3 cots and smell of other people's desperation, it felt like a palace. "Thank you," Elena said softly. Samuel nodded. "Dinner's at 6. Marcus is particular about that. Says kids need routine. You'll meet Owen and Clara then. Fair warning, they're not easy children. They've run off 4 housekeepers in the last 2 years." Elena's stomach dropped. 4? 4, Samuel confirmed. "They're testing you, see? Seeing if you'll stick. Last one made it 3 weeks before she caught the stage back to town." He paused at the doorway. "For what it's worth, I hope you're tougher than you look. Those kids need someone who'll stay." He left her alone in the small room. Elena set down her bag and sank onto the bed, her legs finally giving out. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She'd been sold. Brought to a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere. Expected to raise children who'd chased away 4 women before her. And the man who'd bought her couldn't even look at her without his face turning to stone. Elena pressed her fists against her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd learned that in the months after her father's death, when tears changed nothing and only made the creditors more impatient. Straight spine, baby girl. Elena took a shuddering breath and stood up. She unpacked her bag, 2 spare dresses, some undergarments, a hairbrush, a tin cup that had been her mother's, and a small Bible with her family's names written on the inside cover. Not much to show for 18 years of life. She washed her face in the basin, pinned her hair more neatly, and tried to compose herself. Whatever was coming next, she'd face it. What choice did she have? At 6 o'clock, she descended the stairs on quiet feet. Voices drifted from the kitchen, Samuel's low rumble, and 2 higher, younger voices engaged in some kind of argument. "I don't want another one. They always leave." "You don't even know her yet, Clara." "So?" "The last one was mean, and the one before that smelled funny." "That's because you put a dead mouse in her bureau drawer." "She deserved it. She called me difficult." Elena paused at the doorway to the kitchen, her heart pounding. Through the opening, she could see Marcus Hale standing by the stove, his back rigid. Samuel was setting plates on the table. And 2 children, twins, she realized with a start, identical in their fierce expressions, if not their gender, sat side by side on a bench, arms crossed in mirror images of stubbornness. The girl, Clara, saw her first. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed with suspicion. "Is that her?" The boy, Owen, turned to look. He had his father's gray eyes, sharp and assessing even at 6 years old. Marcus turned as well, his expression unreadable. "Owen, Clara, this is Miss Ward. She'll be taking care of you starting today. You'll treat her with respect." "Will she stay?" Clara demanded. "Or is she going to run away like the others?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's enough." "But enough?" The sharp word silenced the girl, but her expression remained mutinous. Owen said nothing, just watched Elena with an unsettling intensity. Elena forced herself to step into the kitchen. "Hello," she said, trying to keep her voice steady and warm. "You can call me Elena, if you'd like." Clara's lip curled. "I don't like that name." "Clara," Marcus warned. Elena crouched down, bringing herself to eye level with the children. Her grandmother had taught her this. Never stand over a child if you want them to trust you. "That's all right. What would you like to call me?" The question clearly surprised them. Clara blinked, her hostility faltering for a moment. Owen tilted his head, studying her with new interest. "I don't know yet," Clara said finally. "I have to think about it." "That seems fair," Elena replied. "While you're thinking, maybe you can tell me what you like for dinner. I'll be doing the cooking from now on, so I should know what makes you happy." "The last lady couldn't cook," Owen said. His voice was softer than his sister's, more careful. Everything tasted like ashes. "Then we'll have to do better than that, won't we?" Elena smiled at him, and after a moment she saw something flicker in his face. Not quite a smile back, but close. Clara, however, wasn't ready to be won over. "You won't last," she said flatly. "They never do. You'll leave just like all the others, and then Papa will be sad again, and everything will be terrible again." The words hit Elena like a physical blow, not because they were mean, but because they were so achingly honest. This child had been abandoned over and over, and now she was armoring herself against the next inevitable heartbreak. Before Elena could respond, Marcus moved. He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, the first gentle gesture Elena had seen from him. "That's enough for now. Let's eat." Dinner was a tense affair. Samuel had made beef stew, which was hearty but plain. Elena ate quietly, watching the family dynamics play out around the table. Marcus spoke little, answering the children's questions in short sentences. Clara tested boundaries with almost every statement, while Owen watched and calculated. They were both frighteningly intelligent for 6-year-olds, and already skilled at reading the adults around them. "Can Elena tell us a story after dinner?" Owen asked suddenly. Marcus looked at Elena, his expression neutral. "Can you?" Elena swallowed. Yes, I know a few stories." "The last one only knew boring stories about princesses," Clara said dismissively. "I hate princesses." "What about a story about a dragon?" Elena offered. Clara's eyes lit up despite herself. "A real dragon? Not a nice one?" "A very real, very grumpy dragon who hoards gold and eats knights for breakfast." For the first time, Clara smiled, small but genuine. "Okay, you can tell us that one." After dinner, Elena found herself in the children's shared bedroom, a space that was chaotic but clearly loved, full of toys and books and drawings pinned to the walls. The twins climbed into their separate beds, watching her expectantly. Marcus stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. 15 minutes, he said. "Then lights out." Elena nodded and sat in the chair between the two beds. She told them the story of Thornback the dragon, a tale her mother used to tell her, embellishing as she went. Clara hung on every word, gasping at the scary parts. Owen listened more quietly, but she could see his mind working, imagining each scene. When she finished, she tucked them both in, Clara grudgingly allowing it, Owen accepting it with something like relief. "Will you be here in the morning?" Owen asked, his voice very small. Elena's heart clenched. "Yes, I promise." "They all promise," Clara muttered, but there was less venom in it than before. "I know," Elena said honestly, "but I mean it. I'll be here." She didn't know if they believed her. She wasn't sure if she believed herself, but it was the only thing she could offer. She left them in the dark and found Marcus waiting in the hallway. He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "They liked your story," he said finally. "They're good kids," Elena replied. "Scared, but good." Marcus's expression hardened again, walls slamming back into place. "Your room is down the hall. Be up by 5. There's breakfast to make and chores to start. The children wake at 6. "I understand." He turned to leave, then paused. Without looking back at her, he said, "Morrison would have destroyed you. That's the only reason I bid. Don't forget that. This isn't kindness, it's necessity." The words were meant to wound, to keep her at a distance, and they did wound. But Elena lifted her chin and kept her voice steady. "I won't forget, Mr. Hale, but necessity works both ways. You need me as much as I needed saving. I suggest we both remember that." For a moment she thought he might respond. But he just walked away, his heavy footsteps receding down the stairs. Elena returned to her small room and closed the door. She sat on the bed in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Somewhere an owl called. The wind whispered through the eaves. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. She was here. She had survived the auction block, the terrible ride, the awkward dinner. She had a room, a bed, food in her belly. She had made 2 children smile, even if only for a moment. It wasn't freedom, but it was a chance. Elena lay down on the narrow bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. She'd have to learn the household routines, figure out what Marcus expected, find ways to reach the wary twins. She'd have to prove she could stay when all the others had left. But tonight, she was here. And that would have to be enough. As exhaustion finally pulled her under, Elena's last conscious thought was of her mother's words. "Straight spine, baby girl." Her spine was straight, battered, bent, but not broken. Not yet. Tomorrow, she would wake up in this strange house, in this life she never chose, and she would begin the work of surviving. Not just surviving, maybe, if she was very lucky and very strong, actually living. The frontier was a hard place for soft hearts, but Elena Ward had learned, in the crucible of her father's death and her own desperate auction, that she was harder than she looked. She would need to be. Because this was only the beginning. Elena woke to darkness and the sound of roosters crowing in the distance. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was wrong, the sounds were wrong, everything was wrong. Then memory crashed back like cold water. The auction, Marcus Hale, the ranch, the twins. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. What time was it? 5 o'clock, Hale had said. Be up by 5. She fumbled for matches on the small table beside her bed and lit the oil lamp with shaking hands. The weak light revealed her sparse room, her canvas bag still sitting on the floor where she'd left it. Through the window, she could see the faintest gray line on the eastern horizon. Dawn was coming, but it wasn't here yet. Elena dressed quickly in the dim light, splashing cold water on her face from the basin. Her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser looked pale and uncertain. A girl playing at being a woman, trying to fill shoes too big for her feet. She pinned her hair back severely, trying to look older, more capable than she felt. The house was silent as she crept downstairs, the wooden steps creaking under her feet despite her careful movements. The main room was cold, the fireplace dead and full of ash. Elena paused, uncertain. Should she start the fire? Make coffee? Where was the kitchen supplies kept? Matches are in the tin on the mantel. Coffee's in the cupboard left of the stove. Use the water from the pump outside. Elena spun around, her hand flying to her chest. Marcus Hale stood in the doorway to what must be his bedroom, fully dressed despite the early hour. His gray eyes were alert, showing no signs of sleepiness. How long had he been awake? I didn't hear you, Elena said, hating how her voice shook. That was obvious. He moved past her toward the fireplace, so close she could smell wood smoke and leather. I'll start the fire. You get the coffee going. The ranch hands will be here at 5:30 expecting breakfast, and they don't like to wait. How many? Elena asked, already moving toward the kitchen. 6, including Samuel, plus you, me, and the twins. 9 total. Elena's mind raced as she found the coffee tin. 9 people for breakfast, and she'd never cooked for more than 3 in her life. The kitchen was unfamiliar, the stove different from the one she'd learned on. She had 30 minutes, maybe less. She found the pump outside just as Marcus had said, filling the large pot with cold, clear water. The morning air was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and cattle. In the distance, she could see lantern lights moving in the barn, the ranch hands starting their day. Back inside, Marcus had the fire going, flames already licking at fresh logs. He didn't look at her as she passed, focused on adjusting the flue. Elena got the coffee started, then began searching the pantry. Eggs, bacon, flour, lard, breakfast staples. She could work with this. Her hands moved automatically, falling into rhythms her mother had taught her. Slice the bacon, lay it in the pan. Mix flour and salt for biscuits. Crack eggs into a bowl for scrambling. The familiar tasks steadied her nerves, gave her something to focus on besides the silent man by the fireplace and the unknown day stretching ahead. The bacon was sizzling when Samuel entered through the front door, stomping mud from his boots. He nodded at Elena. Smells good already. Better than Marcus's cooking, that's for sure. I heard that, Marcus said dryly from the fireplace. Meant you two. Samuel poured himself coffee, watching Elena work with undisguised curiosity. You know how to make biscuits? Last girl tried, but they came out hard as rocks. My mother taught me, Elena said, cutting the dough and placing rounds on the baking sheet. They should be fine. Other ranch hands began filtering in, men with weathered faces and rough hands, smelling of horses and morning cold. They introduced themselves. Tom, a quiet man with a scar across his cheek. Jake and Jesse, brothers who looked nearly identical. Ramon, whose accent spoke of Mexican heritage, and a young man named Billy, who couldn't be more than 16. They were polite but reserved, clearly waiting to see what kind of person she was before committing to friendliness. Elena served breakfast as the men took their places at the long table. The biscuits had risen properly, golden and flaky. The bacon was crisp, the eggs fluffy. As the men ate, she saw shoulders relax, heard murmurs of approval. It was just food, but it mattered. On a working ranch, good meals were the foundation of morale. "Where are Owen and Clara?" Samuel asked Marcus around a mouthful of biscuit. "Still sleeping. I'll wake them after we eat." Marcus hadn't complimented the food, but Elena noticed he'd taken seconds of everything. "They know about her?" Tom asked, jerking his chin toward Elena. "They met last night." Marcus's tone discouraged further questions, but Samuel, clearly less intimidated by his boss's moods, pressed on. "How'd they take it?" "Like they always do. Suspicious." "Give 'em time," Samuel said. "They're good kids under all that armor." "They're terrors," Jesse corrected with a slight grin. "Remember when they put burrs in that one lady's bed? She left that same night." "That was after she locked them in their room for talking during lunch," Jake pointed out. "They were defending themselves." "By making her horse throw her the next day?" Ramon shook his head, but he was smiling. "Those two are vengeful little things." Elena's stomach tightened as she listened to the stories. Burrs in beds, tampering with horses, dead mice in drawers. These children weren't just testing boundaries. They were at war with any woman who tried to replace their mother. And now it was her turn to be the target. After breakfast, the men headed out to their day's work, checking fences, moving cattle, the endless labor of keeping a ranch running. Elena cleaned up the kitchen, very aware of Marcus still in the house, moving around upstairs. She heard his heavy footsteps, heard doors opening and closing, heard his low voice speaking to the children. Then came the sound of small feet on the stairs, reluctant and slow. Elena dried her hands on her apron and turned to face the twins as they entered the kitchen. Owen and Clara looked smaller in the morning light, vulnerable in their nightclothes with sleep-mussed hair. But their eyes were wide awake and wary, tracking Elena's every movement. "Good morning," Elena said gently. "Are you hungry?" Clara crossed her arms. "I want Papa to make breakfast." "I already ate with the hands," Marcus said, appearing behind them. "Miss Ward will feed you. Then you'll get dressed and do your morning chores." "I don't want her food," Clara insisted, her voice rising toward a whine. Marcus's expression hardened. "You'll eat what's served or you'll go hungry until lunch. Your choice." Clara's face crumpled, tears threatening, but Owen touched her arm gently. "Let's just try it," he murmured. "It smelled good before." The small kindness from brother to sister made Elena's chest ache. These children had only each other in their grief, building a fortress of two against the world. She served them smaller portions of what she'd made for the men, eggs, bacon, a biscuit each. Clara picked at her food with exaggerated disgust, but Owen ate steadily, occasionally glancing at Elena with those two old eyes. "It's good," he said quietly. "Better than Papa's." Marcus, pulling on his work coat by the door, made a sound that might have been amusement. "The bar is low. I'll be out checking the north pasture. Samuel knows where to find me if something comes up." He left without another word, the door closing firmly behind him. The silence he left was somehow louder than his presence. Elena took a breath. First day. First real test. "What are your morning chores?" "We have to feed the chickens and collect eggs," Owen said, "and check if the barn cats need food." "I can help with that," Elena offered. "We don't need help," Clara snapped. "We've been doing it ourselves for ages." "I'm sure you have. But I need to learn where everything is, so maybe you could show me? Consider it teaching instead of helping." Clara looked suspicious, but Owen nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to do exactly what we say." "Deal." After they dressed, Elena followed the twins outside into the bright morning. The ranch looked different in full daylight, bigger, more complex. She could see the scope of the operation now, the careful organization required to keep it all running. Pastures stretched in every direction, divided by neat fencing. The barn was massive, with a hayloft visible through open doors. Chickens scratched in their enclosed run, and somewhere in the distance she could hear cattle lowing. Clara led the way to the chicken coop with the authority of a general commanding troops. She demonstrated the proper way to scatter feed, showed Elena where the nesting boxes were, and supervised as Elena carefully collected eggs into a waiting basket. Owen worked beside them more quietly, ensuring the water troughs were filled and checking for any signs of illness in the birds. They were competent children, Elena realized. Too competent for 6 years old. They'd been forced to grow up fast when their mother died, taking on responsibilities that should have still been years away. "How long have you been taking care of the chickens?" Elena asked. "Since Mama died," Clara said matter-of-factly. "Papa said we needed to be useful, so we learned." 2 years, Owen added softly. "We were 4. 4 years old. Babies, really." Elena's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You do a very good job. The chickens look healthy and well cared for." Clara studied her suspiciously, looking for signs of condescension. Finding none, she shrugged. "It's not hard. Chickens are stupid." From the chicken coop, they moved to the barn. Elena was expecting a dark, musty space, but instead found it well ventilated and organized. Horses occupied stalls on one side, their heads turning to watch as the 3 of them entered. On the other side, she glimpsed milk cows and more equipment than she could identify. "That's Thunder," Owen said, pointing to a large bay gelding. "He's Papa's horse. And that's Sweet Pea. She's old but nice. And that one is Demon." "His real name is Midnight," Clara corrected, "but we call him Demon because he bites everyone except Papa and Ramon." As if on cue, the black horse in question pinned his ears back and showed his teeth. Elena took a prudent step backward. The barn cats appeared as if summoned, 3 lean, half-wild creatures who tolerated the children but fled when Elena tried to approach. Clara laughed at her, the first genuine laugh Elena had heard from her. "They don't like strangers. It takes months before they'll let you touch them." "Then I'll have to be patient," Elena said. "You won't be here in months," Claire replied, all humor vanishing. "So it doesn't matter." Before Elena could respond, Owen called out from the hayloft ladder, "Clara, come look! There's new kittens!" Clara's eyes went wide with excitement, and she scrambled up the ladder with practiced ease. Elena followed more carefully, emerging into the sweet-smelling hayloft. In a shadowy corner, one of the barn cats had indeed made a nest, and 3 tiny kittens mewled beside her. "Oh," Clara breathed, all her hardness melting away. "They're so small." "Can we hold them?" Owen asked. "Not yet," Elena said. "Mama Cat needs to trust us first. But we can watch from here, if we're very quiet." They sat in the hay, the 3 of them, watching the tiny family. The mother cat eyed them warily but didn't flee, apparently deciding they weren't an immediate threat. The kittens, eyes still closed, wiggled and mewed, searching for warmth. "When Mama died," Clara said suddenly, her voice very small, "I used to pretend she was just sleeping, that if I was quiet enough, I wouldn't wake her and she'd be okay." Owen reached over and took his sister's hand. Neither of them looked at Elena, but she felt the trust in this moment, the fact that they'd spoken of their mother in her presence. "I used to do the same thing," Elena said softly. "When my mother died, I'd set her place at the table for weeks, pretending she was just in the other room." Clara's head turned sharply. "Your mama died too?" "When I was 12. She got a fever that wouldn't break. My father and I did everything we could, but—" Elena's voice trailed off. "Some things you can't fix, no matter how hard you try." "That's what killed our mama too," Owen whispered. "A fever. Papa wouldn't let us see her at the end. He said she wouldn't want us to remember her that way." "I'm sure he was trying to protect you." "But we wanted to say goodbye," Clara said, and now tears were sliding down her cheeks. "We wanted to tell her we loved her one more time, and he wouldn't let us. And then she was just gone." Elena's own eyes burned. She wanted to gather these children into her arms, but she sensed they'd bolt if she tried. So instead, she stayed still and let them grieve. "I'm sorry," she said. "That wasn't fair to you." "Papa was different after," Owen continued. "Before, he used to smile sometimes. He'd play with us and tell us stories and carry us on his shoulders. But after Mama died, it was like he died too, except his body forgot to stop walking around." The description was so achingly accurate that Elena felt it like a physical blow. She'd seen that same quality in Marcus Hale, a man hollowed out by grief, functioning but not living. "People grieve differently," Elena said carefully. "Maybe your papa needed to shut down for a while to survive. That doesn't mean he stopped loving you." "It feels like he did," Clara said bitterly. He barely talks to us. He never plays anymore. And he keeps bringing women here to take Mama's place, but none of them stay, and each time they leave, it hurts again. I'm not here to take your mother's place, Elena said firmly. No one could do that. Your mama was yours and no one else's. I'm just here to help, that's all. Clara turned to look at her directly for the first time, searching Elena's face. Do you promise you won't try to be our new mama? I promise. And do you promise you won't leave when we're mean to you? Elena hesitated. Honesty mattered here. I promise I'll try very hard to stay. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I won't give up easily. It wasn't the answer Clara wanted. Elena could see that in the way the girl's face closed off again, but Owen nodded slightly, as if he respected the truth more than a false guarantee. They climbed down from the hayloft and finished the barn chores in contemplative silence. As they walked back to the house, Clara suddenly grabbed Elena's hand. The gesture was brief, over almost as soon as it began, but it happened. Progress. Tiny, fragile, but real. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of domestic labor. Elena washed the breakfast dishes, swept the floors, and began taking inventory of the house. It was more overwhelming than she'd expected. The place wasn't dirty exactly, but it was neglected. Windows that needed washing, curtains that needed mending, furniture that needed polishing. It would take weeks to bring it back to proper order. The twins shadowed her for part of the morning, testing her with small provocations. Clara accidentally knocked over a vase of dried flowers. Owen tracked mud through the kitchen right after she'd mopped. Elena cleaned up both messes without comment, refusing to rise to the bait. By midday, she was exhausted. She made sandwiches for lunch, simple fare, but the twins ate without complaint. They were settling into an uneasy truce, all three of them feeling out the boundaries of this new arrangement. After lunch, Samuel appeared at the door. Marcus wants the kids brought out to the south pasture. They usually ride with him a few times a week, learn the ranch. Can Elena come? Owen asked, surprising everyone. Samuel glanced at Elena, one eyebrow raised. You know how to ride? A little. It's been a while. Good enough. Sweet Pea's gentle, she won't throw you. Samuel's weathered face creased into something almost like a smile. Might do you good to see the operation, understand what Marcus is trying to build here. An hour later, Elena found herself on horseback for the first time in years, following Samuel and the twins across the golden grassland. Sweet Pea was indeed gentle, responding to the lightest touch on the reins. The twins rode their own ponies with confident ease, children who'd grown up in the saddle. The south pasture revealed dozens of cattle grazing peacefully, watched over by Marcus and Ramon. Marcus looked up as they approached, his expression unreadable when he saw Elena. She wanted to see the ranch, Samuel said before Marcus could speak. Figure she ought to know what all the work's for. Marcus nodded slowly. Oh, and Clara, come help me check that calf over there, see if the leg's healing properly. The twins rode off eagerly, leaving Elena alone with Samuel. They sat on their horses in companionable silence, watching Marcus and the children work. From a distance, she could see him soften slightly around his kids, not smiling, but present in a way he wasn't in the house. He showed Owen how to approach the nervous calf, let Clara help examine the injured leg, praised them both when they did well. He's a good father, Elena said quietly, when he lets himself be. He's a broken man, Samuel corrected, not unkindly. But yeah, he tries, more than some would in his position. What happened? To his wife? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Margaret got sick 3 years back. Childbirth fever that never quite cleared, then came back strong 2 years ago. We got the doctor from town, but by the time he arrived, he shook his head. She lasted 3 days, conscious enough to know she was dying, which was maybe the worst part. She made Marcus promise to take care of the kids, to not let his grief destroy him. He promised. But some promises are harder to keep than others. He bought me for the children, Elena said, understanding clicking into place. Not for himself. He bought you because those kids need stability, and he knows he can't give it to them. Not like this. Not while he's still half in the grave with Margaret. Samuel turned to look at her directly. You seem like a decent girl, Elena, but those children need someone who'll weather their storms and still be there in the morning. Can you do that? Elena watched Owen and Clara helping their father, their small faces serious and focused. She thought about the dead mice and the burrs in the bed, about 4 women who'd tried and failed to reach them. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm going to try." Samuel nodded, as if this answer satisfied him. "That's all anyone can do." They returned to the ranch as the sun began its afternoon descent. The twins were chattering about the calf, about ranch business, their earlier hostility toward Elena seemingly forgotten, or at least set aside. Children were mercurial that way, Elena remembered from her own childhood. Grudges could be fierce, but also temporary, especially if you didn't feed them with anger. Dinner preparation began as the day cooled. Elena had found a cookbook in the kitchen, Margaret's, with handwritten notes in the margins. She chose a recipe for beef stew that seemed straightforward, working steadily while the twins did their homework at the kitchen table. Their schoolwork was supervised by Samuel, who turned out to have unexpected patience for teaching. "Mama used to read to us every night," Clara announced suddenly, not looking up from her slate. "Stories about knights and dragons and brave girls who saved kingdoms." "Your papa mentioned you like dragon stories," Elena said, stirring the pot. "Not just dragons, all kinds of things. But Papa doesn't read to us anymore. He says he's too tired." Elena glanced at Owen, who was carefully forming letters on his slate. "Do you miss it, the reading?" "Every single day," Owen said softly. When Marcus came in for dinner, Elena made a decision. After the meal was cleared and the twins were preparing for bed, she approached him in the main room where he sat reviewing ledgers. "Mr. Hale, may I speak with you?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before his usual mask settled back into place. "What is it?" "The children mentioned that their mother used to read to them every night. I'd like to continue that tradition, if you'll allow it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I don't need you to replace Margaret's routines." "I'm not replacing anything," Elena said, holding her ground. "I'm just reading to 2 children who miss being read to, unless you'd prefer to do it yourself." It was a challenge, gentle but unmistakable. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, something dark and painful moving behind his eyes. "Fine," he said finally. "But don't make a production of it. Just read and let them sleep." "Thank you." Elena turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Ward," she looked back. "They liked your dragon story last night." The admission seemed to cost him. "So, thank you for that." It wasn't much, barely an acknowledgement, really, but it was something. Elena nodded and went upstairs. That night, she read to Owen and Clara from Margaret's book collection. She chose adventure stories, tales of courage and loyalty, and the twins listened with rapt attention. Clara fought sleep as long as she could, but eventually her eyes drifted shut. Owen lasted longer, but even he succumbed eventually. Elena tucked them in and was turning to leave when Owen's voice, muzzy with sleep, stopped her. "Elena?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you came, even if Clara won't say it yet." The words settled into Elena's chest like warm stones. "I'm glad too, Owen. Sleep well." The days that followed fell into a pattern. Wake before dawn, make breakfast, clean, teach the children, make lunch, more chores, dinner, stories, sleep. It was exhausting work, but honest work, and Elena found herself settling into the rhythm of it. The twins continued to test her, but their provocations became less vicious. Clara put salt in the sugar bowl. Elena tasted it, made a face, and simply got the correct sugar without comment. Owen forgot to tell her about a wasp nest near the woodpile. She got stung twice, but didn't yell at him, just treated the stings with mud and kept working. Each test she passed seemed to crack their armor a little more. By the end of the first week, Clara was sometimes helping with dishes without being asked. Owen started showing her the ranch's hiding spots, secret places where he went when he needed to think. But Marcus remained distant, a shadow in his own house. He spoke to Elena only when necessary, conducting their interactions like business transactions. At meals, he focused on his food or his children, never on her. He left the house at dawn and didn't return until dusk, as if he couldn't bear to be in the space where his wife's memory still lingered. Elena tried not to let it bother her. She was here for the children, she reminded herself. Marcus Hale's emotional walls were his own problem, but sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she wondered what he'd been like before grief broke him. What kind of man earned such fierce loyalty from his ranch hands? What kind of husband had loved his wife so much that her loss destroyed him? The second week brought new challenges. Clara woke up screaming from a nightmare, calling for her mother. Elena rushed to her room to find Marcus already there, holding his daughter while she sobbed. He looked up at Elena, his face stripped of its usual careful blankness, showing only raw pain. "She has them sometimes," he said roughly. "Dreams where Margaret's alive and then she remembers." "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, feeling intrusive, but Clara reached for her. "Don't go, please don't go." So Elena stayed, sitting on the edge of the bed while Marcus held his daughter. Owen appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes, and climbed onto the bed too. For a few minutes, they sat together in the lamplight, a broken family and the girl who'd been bought to help fix it. Marcus's eyes met Elena's over Clara's head. For just a moment, his guard dropped completely, and she saw everything: the grief, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that maybe, this time, someone would stay. Then Clara's crying softened to hiccups, and the moment passed. Marcus's walls went back up. He stood lifting Clara to settle her back under the covers. "Thank you," he said to Elena, the words stiff but sincere. "You can go back to bed." Elena nodded and left, but she heard Clara's sleepy voice drift after her. "I like her, Papa. She's not like the others." In her own room, Elena pressed her hands against her face and tried to steady her breathing. This family was broken in ways she'd barely begun to understand. The children's grief was tangled up with their fathers, creating a knot of pain that had driven away everyone who'd tried to help. But she was still here. Against all odds, despite the tests and the tears and the terrible weight of it all, she was still here. And somewhere in her chest, beneath the exhaustion and the fear, a stubborn seed of determination had taken root. These children needed her. Maybe, in ways he'd never admit, Marcus needed her too. She wasn't going to abandon them. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Elena made herself a promise. She would stay. She would weather whatever storms came. She would be the steady thing in their chaos, the reliable presence in their grief. Not because a contract said she had to, not because she'd been bought and had nowhere else to go, but because Owen and Clara deserved someone who would choose to stay. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to choose them right back. 3 weeks had passed since Elena arrived at the Hale Ranch, and autumn was settling into the valley like a guest preparing for a long stay. The aspen trees had turned brilliant gold, and the morning air carried a sharp bite that warned of the winter to come. Elena had fallen into the rhythm of ranch life. The early mornings, the endless chores, the careful navigation of Marcus's silences, and the children's slowly thawing hearts. She was kneading bread dough one afternoon when Clara burst through the kitchen door, her face flushed with excitement. "Elena, come see! Owen found something in the creek!" Elena wiped flour from her hands and followed the girl outside, where Owen stood by the water's edge holding something cupped in his palms. As she approached, he opened his hands to reveal a small turtle, no bigger than a silver dollar, its shell perfect and gleaming. "Can we keep him?" Owen asked, his eyes bright with hope. "We could make him a home in a box with water and rocks." "I don't know if your father would—" "Papa won't care," Clara interrupted. "He never cares about things like this anymore." The casual cruelty of the statement, not meant as cruelty at all, just as fact, hit Elena harder than she expected. But she pushed the feeling aside and crouched down to examine the turtle with proper seriousness. "He's beautiful. But you know, turtles are wild creatures. They don't always do well being kept." "We'll take good care of him," Owen promised. "Better than good. Perfect." Elena looked at their eager faces and couldn't bring herself to say no. "All right. But if he seems unhappy, we let him go. Deal?" "Deal." They spent the rest of the afternoon creating an elaborate turtle habitat in a wooden crate, arguing cheerfully about the proper arrangement of rocks and water. Elena watched them work, marveling at how different they seemed from the hostile, guarded children she'd met 3 weeks ago. Clara laughed freely now, at least when her father wasn't around. Owen had started seeking Elena out to share his thoughts, his observations about the world around them. It wasn't perfect. The twins still had moments of withdrawal, times when grief hit them sideways and they retreated into themselves or each other. and they still spoke very little to their father, maintaining a careful distance as if afraid that getting too close would hurt somehow. Marcus, for his part, remained locked in his fortress of silence. He acknowledged Elena's presence with curt nods, occasionally commented on a meal being good or adequate, but never lingered to talk. He was a ghost in his own house, present but not participating, alive but not living. That evening, as Elena prepared dinner, Samuel came in from the range with a troubled expression. He found Marcus in the barn and spoke to him in low, urgent tones that Elena couldn't quite make out through the open window. But she saw Marcus's shoulders stiffen, saw him nod tersely. When Marcus came in for dinner, his face was tight with worry. He ate quickly, barely tasting the food, his attention somewhere far away. "Papa, are you okay?" Clara asked, her small voice uncertain. "I'm fine, Clara. Just ranch business." But his voice was strained, and even the children could hear it. After dinner, Marcus pulled Samuel aside again. Elena caught fragments of their conversation as she cleared the table. 6 head missing from the north pasture. Tracks heading toward the high country. Need to go at first light. "You want me to come with you?" Samuel asked. "No, I need you here. Tom and Ramon will ride with me. Should be back in 2 days, 3 at most." Elena's hand stilled on the dish she was washing. Marcus was leaving, for days. It would be just her and the children, alone on the ranch. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, and for the first time since that night with Clara's nightmare, he looked directly at Elena. Really looked, his gray eyes searching her face. "I have to ride out tomorrow to track some missing cattle. Could be rustlers, could be wolves. Either way, I need to handle it." "I understand. Samuel and the other hands will be around during the day. If there's any trouble, send Billy to town for the sheriff." "We'll be fine," Elena said, more confidently than she felt. Marcus hesitated, something working behind his carefully controlled expression. "The children, they're warming up to you. Don't think I haven't noticed." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given her. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "They're good kids. They just needed someone patient enough to see it. The last woman who said that was gone within a week." The words were harsh, but there was something underneath them. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "You've lasted longer than any of the others. Longer than I expected, honestly." "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Hale." He studied her for another long moment, then nodded once and left to prepare for his departure. The next morning, Elena woke to find Marcus already gone, riding out before dawn with Tom and Ramon. The house felt different without him, emptier but also somehow lighter, as if his grief had been a physical weight pressing down on everything. The twins took the news of their father's absence with the resigned acceptance of children used to being left behind. "He goes sometimes," Owen explained as they fed the chickens, "following cattle or fixing fences far away. He always comes back." "Do you miss him when he's gone?" Elena asked. Clara shrugged. "Sometimes. But it's not that different from when he's here. He's always kind of away, even when he's standing right in front of us." The observation was devastating in its accuracy. Elena changed the subject, not trusting herself to respond without revealing too much emotion. The day passed normally, chores, meals, lessons. The turtle, whom the twins had named General Sherman for reasons Elena didn't quite understand, seemed content in his box. As evening approached, dark clouds rolled in from the west, and the wind picked up with a keening sound that made the horses restless in their stalls. "Storm's coming," Samuel observed at dinner. "Big one by the look of it. You 3 best stay inside tonight. Wind like this can take shingles off the roof." The storm hit just after sunset. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rolled across the valley like artillery fire. The twins pressed close to Elena as she read to them, flinching at each crack of lightning. "I don't like storms," Clara whispered. "Mama died on a night like this." Elena pulled the girl closer. "Your papa will be all right. He knows these mountains." "But what if he's not?" Owen's voice was small and frightened. "What if something happens and he doesn't come back?" "He'll come back, I promise." But even as she said it, Elena felt the weight of that promise. She had no way of knowing if Marcus was safe out there in the wilderness, tracking rustlers or wolves through the storm. All she could do was project confidence she didn't entirely feel and hope it was enough to calm the children's fears. She tucked them into bed and stayed until they fell asleep, listening to the storm rage outside. When she finally went to her own room, exhaustion pulled her under quickly despite the thunder. She didn't know what time it was when Clara's scream woke her. Elena bolted upright, her heart hammering. Another scream, high and terrified. She grabbed her shawl and ran down the hall in her nightgown, her bare feet slapping against the cold wooden floor. Clara's room was dark except for intermittent lightning flashes. Elena fumbled for the lamp, got it lit with shaking hands. Clara was sitting up in bed, her face flushed and her eyes glassy with fever. "Mama," she whimpered. "I want Mama." Elena pressed her hand to Clara's forehead and felt her stomach drop. The child was burning up, dangerously hot. "Owen," Elena called out, trying to keep her voice calm. "Owen, wake up." The boy appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Then he saw his sister and went very still. "Clara's sick." "Yes. I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?" Owen nodded, his face pale. "Good boy. Run downstairs and pump cold water into the biggest pot you can carry. Then bring it up here with all the clean cloths you can find. Can you do that?" "Yes." Owen disappeared, and Elena heard his feet pounding down the stairs. She turned her attention back to Clara, who was shaking now despite the fever, her teeth chattering. "It's all right, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm going to take care of you." "I'm cold," Clara moaned. "So cold. I know, baby, I know." Elena stripped off the sweat-soaked nightgown and wrapped Clara in a light blanket. Fever was a monster she knew well. It had taken her mother, and before that, 2 of her childhood friends. You had to fight it hard and fast, or it would consume everything. Owen returned with water sloshing in a large pot, his thin arms straining under the weight. Elena soaked cloths in the cold water and began pressing them against Clara's burning skin, forehead, neck, wrists, feet. The girl whimpered and tried to pull away, but Elena held firm. "I need you to help me, Owen. Keep soaking these cloths and handing them to me. We have to get her fever down." They worked together through the long hours of the night, changing cloths as they warmed, trying to coax water past Clara's cracked lips, monitoring every change in her breathing. The storm raged outside, the wind howling like something alive and angry. Lightning illuminated the room in stark flashes, turning everything into a nightmare landscape of shadow and harsh light. Around midnight, Clara's fever spiked higher. She began thrashing in the bed, calling for her mother in a voice that broke Elena's heart. "Mama, Mama, where are you? I can't find you." "Shh, Clara, I'm here. You're safe. I want Mama. Why won't she come? Why won't she answer?" Owen burst into tears, pressing his fists against his eyes. "Clara, please, please stop." Elena pulled him close with one arm, while continuing to tend his sister with the other. "It's the fever talking, Owen. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's going to be all right." But even as she spoke the words, doubt clawed at her. Clara's fever wasn't breaking. If anything, it was getting worse, and she was so small, so fragile. How much could a 6-year-old body endure? Around 2 in the morning, Owen's breathing became labored. Elena touched his forehead, and her worst fear materialized. He was burning up too. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." But denying it changed nothing. Owen's eyes were glazing over with the same feverish sheen as his sister's. Within minutes, he was shaking violently, his small body racked with chills. Elena stood frozen for a heartbeat, panic threatening to overwhelm her completely. Both children sick. Marcus gone. The storm making it impossible to ride for the doctor. She was alone with 2 desperately ill children, and if she failed, if they died. No, she couldn't think like that. Her mother had fought death for 3 days before losing. These children would not lose. She would not let them. "All right," she said aloud, forcing her voice to steadiness. "All right. We can do this." She got Owen into Clara's bed so she could tend them both at once. She worked with methodical determination, cold cloths, water, monitoring their breathing, whispering prayers to anything that might be listening. The hours blurred together into an endless cycle of fever and fear. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, the front door crashed open. Elena's head snapped up, her heart leaping into her throat. Had someone come? The doctor? Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Samuel appeared in the doorway, his weathered face creased with worry. Billy saw the light and heard the commotion, came and woke me. What's happened? Both of them, Elena said, hearing the tremor in her voice. Fever. It came on so fast, Samuel, so fast. Samuel's face went gray. He moved closer, looking at the children, and Elena saw something terrible move behind his eyes. Recognition. Memory. This is how we lost Margaret, he said quietly. Started just like this. Sudden fever, both of them sick together, and then he cut himself off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Elena's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying this is bad, Elena. Real bad. We need the doctor from town. In this storm, the roads will be rivers. Then we pray the rain stops soon. Samuel moved to the window, staring out at the deluge. Marcus is going to come home to this, and if those children... His voice broke. He won't survive it. Not again. The weight of those words settled on Elena's shoulders like a physical burden. She looked at Owen and Clara, both burning with fever, both calling for their dead mother in voices thin with pain. If they died while Marcus was gone, it would destroy him. Whatever was left of the man beneath the grief would shatter completely. They're not going to die, Elena said fiercely. I won't let them. Samuel turned to look at her, and in his expression she saw both hope and doubt warring for dominance. You can't fight death by willpower alone, girl. Watch me. For the next hour, Samuel helped her tend the children. He knew remedies Margaret had used: willow bark tea for fever, cool baths if the temperature got too high, specific pressure points that sometimes helped. They tried everything, working with desperate efficiency, but the fevers wouldn't break. Around 4:30, Clara began convulsing. Her small body went rigid, her eyes rolling back, her breath coming in terrible gasping rattles. Elena held her down, terrified the child would hurt herself, while Samuel ran for more cold water. Stay with me, Clara, Elena pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Please, baby. Please stay with me. Your papa needs you. Owen needs you. I need you. Please. The convulsion lasted an eternity, probably only a minute or two in reality, before Clara went limp, her breathing shallow but steady. Elena pressed her ear to the girl's chest and nearly sobbed with relief when she heard the heartbeat, rapid but strong. Owen was crying weakly, too sick to sit up but aware enough to be terrified for his sister. She's still here, Owen. She's fighting, and so are you. Both of you are fighters. You hear me? You're fighters, just like your papa. Samuel returned with fresh water, and they resumed their vigil. The night stretched on, hours that felt like years. Elena's arms ached from wringing cloths. Her back screamed from bending over the bed. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Just before dawn, the storm finally broke. The rain slowed to a drizzle, then stopped entirely. The wind died down, and in the sudden silence, Elena could hear birds beginning their morning songs, oblivious to the drama playing out inside the house. And then, so gradual she almost missed it, she felt Clara's forehead and realized it was cooler. Not much, but enough to notice. Samuel, she whispered, I think it's breaking. Samuel touched Clara's face, then Owen's. His eyes widened. Mother of mercy, you might be right. Over the next hour, as weak sunlight filtered through the windows, both children's fevers slowly, agonizingly, slowly began to drop. Their breathing steadied. The terrible flush in their cheeks faded to a more natural pink. They slipped from fevered delirium into genuine sleep. Elena sat back against the wall, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Samuel sank into the chair by the bed, his face in his hands. You did it, he said, his voice rough. I don't know how, but you did it. We did it, Elena corrected, but the words came out slurred. The room was tilting sideways, and she realized dimly that she hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't rested in over 12 hours. Adrenaline had kept her upright, but now that the crisis was passing, her body was demanding payment. Easy, Samuel said, suddenly beside her, helping her to her feet. Let's get you to your room before you collapse right here. The children, I'll watch them. Billy can help. You've done your part, girl. Now you need to rest before you make yourself sick, too. Elena wanted to argue, but her legs were buckling. Samuel half carried her to her room and helped her onto the bed. She was asleep before he'd even left the doorway. She woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of voices downstairs. For a confused moment, she couldn't remember why she was so exhausted, why every muscle in her body ached. Then memory crashed back and she sat up so fast her head spun. The children. She had to check on the children. She stumbled down the hall to their room, her nightgown still damp with sweat and water from the night's ordeal. But when she pushed open the door, she found both twins awake, propped up on pillows, eating broth that Billy was carefully spooning to them. "Elena!" Owen's voice was weak but clear. "You're awake." "You were sleeping for so long," Clara added, her own voice a thin thread. "We were worried about you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She crossed the room and knelt by the bed, taking each child's hand in hers. "You're all right. You're both all right." "Billy said we were really sick," Owen said. "He said you stayed up all night taking care of us." "Samuel said you saved our lives," Clara whispered. "Is that true?" Elena shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She just held their small hands and let the tears come. Tears of relief, of exhaustion, of overwhelming gratitude that they were alive, they were here, they were going to be okay. "Don't cry," Clara said, and then she was crying too. "Please don't cry. We're sorry we were mean to you at first. We're sorry we tested you and tried to make you leave." "I'm not crying because I'm sad," Elena managed. "I'm crying because I'm happy, because you're here and you're safe and I—" She stopped, surprised by what she'd been about to say. "You what?" Owen asked. Elena looked at their faces, pale and thin from illness, but alive, so blessedly alive, and spoke the truth. "I love you both. I know I haven't been here long, and I know I'm not your mother and I never will be. But I love you, and I was so scared I was going to lose you." Clara launched herself into Elena's arms with a sob. Owen followed a second later. They clung to her, all three of them crying, while Billy tactfully slipped out of the room to give them privacy. "We love you too," Clara whispered against Elena's shoulder. "We didn't want to, but we do. We've loved you for weeks, but we were too scared to say it." "Why scared?" Elena asked gently. "Because everyone we love leaves," Owen said simply. "Mama left. Papa might as well have left, even though he's still here. The other ladies all left. We thought if we loved you, you'd leave too." "I'm not leaving," Elena said fiercely, pulling them closer. "I promise you, I am not leaving. Not now. Not ever, if you'll have me." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, healing something that went deeper than fever. When they finally pulled apart, Clara touched Elena's face with wonder. "You really mean it?" "I really mean it." A commotion downstairs broke the moment. The sound of horses, men's voices, boots on the porch. Elena's heart jumped. Marcus was home. She heard Samuel's voice low and urgent, speaking quickly. Then silence. Then footsteps on the stairs, heavy and fast. Marcus appeared in the doorway like a storm himself. 3 days of trail dust coating his clothes, his face haggard with exhaustion and something else. Fear. Samuel had told him. He knew what had happened. His eyes went immediately to the children, scanning them with desperate intensity. "Owen, Clara." "We're okay, Papa," Owen said. "We were sick, but Elena—" Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled both children into his arms, his face pressed against their hair. His shoulders shook, and Elena realized with shock that he was crying, silent, wrenching sobs that came from someplace deep and broken inside him. "I thought—" His voice cracked. "When Samuel told me, I thought I was going to lose you too. I thought—" "We're here, Papa," Clara said, patting his back awkwardly. "We're right here. Elena saved us." Marcus's eyes opened and found Elena's over the children's heads. And for the first time since she'd met him, there was no wall, no careful distance, just raw, overwhelming emotion, gratitude, relief, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Samuel told me what you did," he said hoarsely, "that you stayed up all night, that you fought for them when—" He couldn't finish. "They're strong," Elena said simply. "They fought too. I just helped." Marcus carefully released the children and stood, moving toward Elena. She rose as well, suddenly very aware that she was still in her nightgown, her hair loose and tangled, looking like something the storm had dragged in. "Thank you." The words were inadequate, and they both knew it. "I can never— there's no way to— You don't have to thank me, Mr. Hale. She stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. "They're mine, too." But that wasn't true. Not really. She was just the hired help, the girl he'd bought at auction to care for his children. Except somewhere in the long night of fever and fear, something had shifted. The children had claimed her, and she'd claimed them back. She loved them. She'd faced down death for them. That changed things in ways that contracts and money couldn't define. Marcus saw it in her face. She knew he did. His expression shifted, something cracking in that impenetrable armor he'd built around himself. "Papa," Clara said, her voice tired. "Can Elena stay, forever and ever? Please?" Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Elena. "She has to stay," he said quietly. "We need her." It wasn't a declaration of anything beyond practical necessity. But in that moment, in the charged space between them while the children watched with knowing eyes, it felt like more. Like a door opening just a crack. Like possibility. "Then I'll stay," Elena said softly. And for the first time since his wife died, Marcus Hale smiled. It was small, rusty from disuse, and gone almost as soon as it appeared. But Elena saw it, and something in her chest unfurled like a flower reaching toward unexpected sun. They weren't fixed, not even close. The grief was still there, the trauma, the careful walls. But they'd survived the night together, and that meant something. In the days that followed, as the twins recovered their strength, the atmosphere in the house shifted in subtle but unmistakable ways. Marcus spoke more at dinner, asking about the children's day. He came in earlier from the range, spending evenings in the main room instead of retreating to his bedroom. He didn't smile again. That first smile had been a rare gift, not easily repeated, but the terrible emptiness in his eyes had lessened. And sometimes, when he thought Elena wasn't looking, she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the cold assessment of those first days, or even simple gratitude. It was something more complex, more conflicted. Elena tried not to read too much into it. She focused on the children, on the rhythms of the ranch, on making this strange house feel like home. But she couldn't help feeling that something fundamental had changed in the long, terrible night when she'd fought death and won. The ranch hands noticed it too. "Boss seems different," Ramon mentioned to Samuel one morning, not realizing Elena could hear. "Like he's waking up after a long sleep." "About time," Samuel replied. "Margaret's been gone 2 years. Man can't mourn forever, not when he's got living children to raise. That girl, Elena, she's good for them. Good for all of them, maybe." "Maybe," Samuel agreed, "if Marcus is smart enough to see it." Elena pretended she hadn't heard, but the words stayed with her, planting seeds of something she didn't dare name yet. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. The weeks following the fever blurred together in Elena's memory like watercolors bleeding into each other, golden autumn days that grew shorter as winter approached, the twins growing stronger and more confident, and Marcus slowly, almost imperceptibly, returning to the world of the living. It was the small changes that struck her most. The way he started lingering after breakfast instead of bolting for the door. How he'd sometimes join them for the children's evening stories, standing in the doorway like he wasn't quite sure he was allowed to enter, but couldn't stay away either. The rare moments when his hand would brush hers as they both reached for something at dinner, and instead of pulling away immediately, he'd pause for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Elena tried not to read meaning into these moments. She was 18 years old, had been bought at auction, and was contracted to serve his household. Whatever complicated emotions she was developing, and she couldn't deny them anymore, not when her heart jumped every time he entered a room, were inappropriate at best, dangerous at worst. But the twins, with the uncanny perception of children, saw everything. "Papa likes you," Clara announced one morning while they collected eggs. She said it matter-of-factly, as if commenting on the weather. Elena nearly dropped the basket. "What makes you say that?" "He watches you when you're not looking. And yesterday, when you were reaching for the flower on the high shelf and almost fell, he moved so fast to catch you. Faster than I've ever seen him move for anything except us." He was just being careful. He doesn't want anyone getting hurt on his property. Clara gave her a look that was far too knowing for a 6-year-old. That's not the face he makes when Billy almost falls off the barn roof. That's a different face. Owen, who'd been quiet until now, added his own observation. He smiles more when you're around. Not big smiles, but little ones. Like he's forgotten how sad he is for a minute. Elena's chest tightened. Your papa is still grieving your mother. That's natural and right. Whatever you think you're seeing... We know he loved Mama, Clara interrupted. We're not trying to replace her or forget her, but Mama's gone and you're here, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay for Papa to be happy again. The casual wisdom of it stunned Elena into silence. These children, who'd tested her so viciously at first, who'd driven away 4 women before her, were now giving her permission to... what? Love their father? Let him love her, if he even did. She wasn't sure. The looks could mean anything or nothing. Men didn't fall in love with girls they'd purchased to raise their children. That was the stuff of fairy tales, not real life. But real life had a way of surprising you, Elena was learning. That afternoon, Marcus asked her to ride out with him to check on the cattle in the eastern pasture. It was unusual. He typically took one of the hands for such tasks. But Samuel had a knowing glint in his eye when Marcus made the request, and the twins exchanged excited glances that neither adult was supposed to notice. I can stay with the children if you need, Samuel offered, far too innocently. We'll be fine, Samuel, Clara said with exaggerated patience. We're not babies anymore. Elena almost died saving us. We can handle a few hours alone. I didn't almost die, Elena protested, but Marcus was already heading for the barn, and she had to hurry to keep up. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes, the only sounds the creak of saddle leather and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. The day was crystalline and cold, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already white with early snow. Finally, Marcus spoke. The children are different since you came. Happier. More like they used to be before. He stopped, his jaw tightening. They're wonderful children, Elena said carefully. They just needed someone to see past the armor. 4 women before you tried. All of them gave up. Maybe they didn't understand what grief does to people, especially children. Elena guided Sweet Pea around a fallen log. When my mother died, I was angry for months. I said terrible things to my father, things I regretted later. I tested him constantly, pushing to see if he'd abandon me, too. He never did, even though I made it hard. Marcus glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. I didn't know that. About your mother. There's a lot you don't know about me, Mr. Hale. You never asked. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, carrying months of accumulated hurt. All the times he'd treated her as invisible, as furniture, as a tool purchased for a specific purpose and nothing more. Marcus's hands tightened on the reins. You're right. I didn't ask. I didn't want to... He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. I didn't want to see you as a person. It was easier to keep you at a distance, safer. Safer for whom? For me. The admission was quiet but devastating. Everyone I let close to me either leaves or dies. Margaret, my parents, even my brother to disease 5 years back. I wasn't ready to risk that again. Elena's anger dissolved, replaced by something achingly tender. So you've been living at arm's length from everyone, even your own children. I know. His voice was rough. I know, and it's wrong, and I've been trying, since that night with the fever, I've been trying to do better, to be present instead of just existing. I've noticed, Elena said softly. So have Owen and Clara. They reached the eastern pasture, where cattle grazed peacefully on the brown grass. Marcus dismounted and checked the fence line, testing posts for stability. Elena watched him work, noting the competence in his movements, the care he took even with mundane tasks. This was a man who took pride in his work, who built things to last. Elena, he said her name suddenly, not looking at her, his hand resting on a fence post. That night, when the children were sick, Samuel told me what you said to him, that I wouldn't survive losing them. Elena's breath caught. She'd forgotten Samuel had been there for that conversation, in her exhaustion and fear. You were right, Marcus continued. If they'd died while I was gone, I would have. He stopped, his shoulders rigid. I've been so angry at Margaret for leaving, so angry at the world. I forgot that my children lost her too, and they needed me to be strong for them. Instead, I abandoned them in everything but body. You were grieving. That's not an excuse. He finally turned to face her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I let 2 years pass, 2 years of their childhood that I can't get back. I was so busy being buried with my dead wife that I forgot my living children needed a father. Elena dismounted and crossed to him, acting on instinct. She took his hand, rough, calloused, scarred from years of hard work, and held it between both of hers. You're here now. That's what matters. They don't need perfection, Marcus. They just need you to try. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and they both felt the weight of it. The shift from formal employer-employee distance to something more intimate, more real. Marcus stared down at their joined hands, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know how to do this, how to move forward, how to honor Margaret's memory while still living my own life. You do it one day at a time, Elena said. You wake up, you love your children, you do the work in front of you, and slowly the weight gets a little lighter. The pain doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it without it crushing you. Is that what you did? After your mother? Eventually, it took a long time. My father helped when he was sober enough, but mostly I just kept going, because the alternative was giving up, and my mother didn't raise me to give up. Marcus's free hand rose slowly, hesitantly, and touched her face. Just his fingertips, tracing the line of her cheekbone with a gentleness that stole her breath. How did you get so wise at 18? I'm not wise. I'm just someone who survived hard things. Elena's heart was thundering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Like you, like your children. We're all survivors here. Elena, He stopped, his hand dropping away. The moment broke, and he stepped back, shaking his head. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. That was inappropriate. Was it? Elena challenged, emboldened by the ghost of his touch still warm on her skin. Or are you just afraid? Marcus's eyes widened, then his jaw set. You're 18 years old. I'm 15 years older than you. I bought you at an auction because you had no other choice. Any feelings you think you have, don't you dare, Elena interrupted, her voice shaking with sudden fury. Don't you dare tell me what I feel. Yes, you bought me. Yes, I was desperate. But that was months ago, and I've stayed because I chose to, because I love your children and this ranch. And she stopped herself just in time, but they both knew what she'd been about to say. And, Marcus pressed, his voice rough. Elena lifted her chin, meeting his eyes directly. And you. I love you, Marcus Hale. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to. But somewhere between the auction block and the fever night and every day in between, I fell in love with you. So don't insult me by suggesting I don't know my own heart. The words hung between them like smoke, impossible to take back. Elena waited, her pulse racing, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Marcus stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Then, slowly, his expression crumbled, not with rejection, but with something far more complicated. You can't love me. I'm broken, Elena. You're a widower who's been grieving. You're a father trying to find his way back to his children. You're a man who saved me from something terrible, whether you meant to or not. Elena took a step closer. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. I regret it, Marcus said suddenly, fiercely. The way I brought you here. If I could go back, I'd do it differently. I'd court you properly, give you choices, treat you with the respect you deserved, not buy you like livestock and expect you to be grateful. I'm not asking you to erase the past. I'm asking you to look at the present, at who we are now, not who we were then. Marcus reached for her again, both hands cupping her face this time, his touch reverent and desperate. I don't deserve you. You should be with someone young and whole, someone who hasn't been hollowed out by grief, someone who can give you a real life. Not, I don't want someone else, Elena said firmly. I want you, exactly as you are, grief, scars, broken pieces and all, Because I've seen you with your children. I've seen you fight to come back to life even when it hurts. I've seen your strength and your vulnerability and your impossible stubborn pride, and I love all of it. Elena. Her name on his lips was prayer and plea and promise all at once. I'm terrified of this. Of you. Of what it means to let someone in again. I know. I'm terrified too, but maybe that's okay. Maybe love is supposed to be a little bit terrifying. Marcus pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing the same air, letting the truth of what had been spoken settle into their bones. I think I've been falling in love with you since that night with the fever, Marcus admitted quietly. Watching you fight for my children like they were your own. Seeing the way you refused to give up even when it seemed hopeless. You were magnificent and brave, and I realized, his voice broke. I realized I wanted to be brave too. For them. For you. You are brave, Elena whispered. You're here, aren't you? Opening your heart again even though it terrifies you. That's the bravest thing I know. Marcus kissed her then, softly at first, as if she might shatter, then deeper as she melted against him. It was a kiss that tasted of grief and hope and new beginnings, of two broken people finding a way to be whole together. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathless, Marcus kept her close, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she might disappear. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I haven't courted a woman since Margaret, and the circumstances are all wrong. You're young, you were desperate, people will talk. Let them talk, Elena said fiercely. I don't care what anyone thinks except you and the children. The children adore you. They've been not so subtly pushing us together for weeks. I think Claire's been planning our wedding since you saved their lives. Elena laughed. The sound startled out of her. Has she? She asked me yesterday if you could be her new mother. Not to replace Margaret, but, well, she said every girl should have a mother, and since hers was in heaven, maybe you could be her earth mother. Marcus's expression softened. Owen agreed. He said you already feel like family. Tears pricked Elena's eyes. They said that? They did, and they're right. You do feel like family, like you've always been part of us, and we were just waiting for you to arrive. Marcus stroked her hair gently. I know this is fast. I know we should probably wait, take things slow, do this properly. But I'm 33 years old, Elena. I've already lost years to grief. I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. What are you saying? Elena asked, though her heart already knew. Marcus took a deep breath, then stepped back just enough to take both her hands in his. I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I want you to stay, not because a contract says you must, but because you choose to. And I'm saying, he swallowed hard. I'm saying that if you'll have me, broken pieces and all, I'd like to court you properly, with walks and conversations and a real chance to know each other without the weight of desperation between us. And after the courting? Elena's voice trembled with hope and joy. After the courting, if you still want me, I'm saying I'd like to make you my wife, not because I need a housekeeper or a caretaker for my children, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it, because you brought light back into this house, back into my heart, back into my children's eyes, because you're brave and strong and kind, and you make me want to be a better man. Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face even as she smiled. Yes, yes to all of it, the courting and the conversations and especially to being your wife. Yes, Marcus, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, bright and fierce. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were laughing, giddy with the sudden shift from careful distance to open affection. We should head back, Marcus said reluctantly, before the twins send out a search party. Or worse, before Samuel comes looking and gives me that knowing look of his. They rode back to the ranch side by side, close enough that their stirrups occasionally bumped. The silence between them was different now, warm and comfortable, full of shared understanding. Every so often, Marcus would glance at her with an expression that made Elena's heart skip, and she'd grin back like a fool. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Elena could see smoke rising from the chimney, the warm glow of lamplight already visible in the windows. It looked like home, felt like home, in a way nowhere had since her mother died. As they dismounted at the barn, Owen and Clara burst from the house and came running. "Did you tell her?" Clara demanded, skidding to a stop in front of her father. "Did you finally tell her?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Tell her what?" "Papa!" Owen groaned. "Don't play dumb. Did you tell her you love her?" Marcus glanced at Elena, his lips twitching with amusement. "I might have mentioned something along those lines." "And?" Clara bounced on her toes with impatience. "What did she say?" "She said yes," Elena answered, crouching down to their level. "Your papa asked if he could court me properly, and I said yes." The twins erupted into cheers, throwing themselves at Elena and Marcus both, creating a tangle of arms and laughter. Samuel appeared on the porch, took one look at the scene, and smiled with deep satisfaction. "About damn time," he called out. "I was starting to think you two would dance around each other until winter." Marcus shot him a look, but couldn't quite hide his own smile. "Don't you have work to do, old man?" "Nope. Already finished so I could watch this unfold. Billy owes me $5. He bet it would take you another month to work up the courage." "You were betting on us?" Elena asked, torn between amusement and embarrassment. "Everyone on the ranch was betting on you," Samuel admitted cheerfully. "Even Ramon put money down, and he's usually too sensible for that sort of thing." That evening, after dinner and stories, and after the twins were finally asleep, Elena and Marcus sat together on the porch in the cold night air. Marcus had draped a blanket around her shoulders and kept his arm around her waist, and Elena leaned into his warmth with a contentment she'd never imagined feeling. "Tell me about her," Elena said softly. "About Margaret. I want to know who she was." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Elena wondered if she'd pushed too far. But then he began to speak, his voice low and thoughtful. "Margaret was the daughter of the town schoolteacher, smart as a whip, stubborn as a mule, and she could outride half the men in the county. I was 21 when I met her, fresh off building this ranch with money I'd saved working other people's land. She was 18, same age you are now." He paused, the irony not lost on either of them. "I courted her for a year before her father would let me marry her. He thought I was too rough, too uneducated. But Margaret saw something in me, something worth taking a chance on." "She sounds wonderful," Elena said honestly. "She was. She made this house a home, planted those rose bushes by the front steps, hung curtains in every window, filled the place with laughter. The twins were born here, right upstairs in our bedroom. She was so strong through the whole thing, even when things got difficult." His voice thickened. "The fever started a week after they were born. The doctor said it was common, that most women recovered. But Margaret didn't. She got better for a while, almost 2 years. We thought she'd beaten it. Then it came back, and this time—" Elena squeezed his hand. "You don't have to continue if it hurts too much." "No, I want to. You should know." Marcus took a shaky breath. "She knew she was dying near the end. She made me promise to take care of the children, to not let grief destroy me. She said—" His voice broke, and he had to pause. "She said she wanted me to find love again someday, that she didn't want me to be alone forever. I was so angry at her for saying it, like she was giving up. But now I think maybe she knew me better than I knew myself. She knew I'd try to bury myself with her if she didn't make me promise otherwise." "She loved you very much," Elena said. "She did. And I loved her. I still do, in a way. But it's different now. The grief isn't so sharp. And when I look at you—" He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting starlight. "When I look at you, I don't feel guilty for feeling happy. I feel like maybe Margaret would approve. Like maybe this is what she meant when she asked me to keep living." "I think she would approve," Elena said softly. "Because I'll take care of her children like they're my own. Because I'll make you happy if you'll let me. Because I'll honor her memory by giving this family the love and life she wanted for you." Marcus pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "How did I get so lucky? To be rescued by the very person I thought I was rescuing." "Maybe we rescued each other," Elena suggested. "Maybe that's what love is sometimes. Two broken people helping each other heal." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead and listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Inside the house, the children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and safe. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. They'd have to navigate the proper courting, face the town's gossip, learn to blend their separate griefs into a shared future. But tonight, wrapped in blankets and each other's warmth, they were simply two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. The girl who'd been sold at auction and the man who'd bought her, both discovering that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. "Elena," Marcus said quietly. Thank you for not giving up on us, for staying when it was hard, for loving my children, for," his voice caught, "for loving me." Elena turned in his arms and kissed him softly. "Thank you for taking a chance on the girl on the auction block, for seeing past her desperation to who she really was, for letting me prove I could stay." "You did more than stay," Marcus murmured against her lips. "You brought us back to life." And there, under the vast Colorado sky, with the ranch house warm and welcoming behind them and the promise of tomorrow stretching ahead, they sat together and dreamed of the future they'd build. One day, one choice, one act of love at a time. The morning after their confession on the eastern pasture, Elena woke to find the world transformed. Not the physical world, which looked exactly as it had the day before, but her place in it. She was no longer just the hired help, the girl bought at auction to mind the children. She was the woman Marcus Hale loved, the woman he wanted to court and eventually marry. The shift was dizzying and wonderful and terrifying all at once. She dressed carefully, pinning her hair with extra attention, and descended the stairs to find Marcus already in the kitchen starting the coffee. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face, open, unguarded, genuinely happy, made her heart skip. "Good morning," he said softly, crossing to her. He took her hand and kissed it, a gesture both old-fashioned and achingly tender. "Did you sleep well?" "I kept waking up thinking I dreamed yesterday," Elena admitted, "that I'd imagined all of it." "If you did, then we're sharing the same dream." Marcus pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Because I've been awake since 4, staring at the ceiling and marveling at how everything changed." They stood like that for a moment, just holding each other in the quiet dawn, until the sound of small feet on the stairs broke them apart. Owen and Clara tumbled into the kitchen, still in their nightclothes, their faces bright with excitement. "Is it true?" Clara demanded without preamble. "Samuel said you're going to marry Elena. Is it true?" Marcus crouched down to his children's level, pulling them both close. "It's true that I love Elena very much, and that she's agreed to let me court her properly. But marriage, that's something we'll talk about when the time is right. For now, I want you two to understand that this doesn't change how much I love you. You're my children, and you always will be. Nothing and no one could ever change that." "We know, Papa," Owen said seriously. "We're not worried about that. We want you to be happy again. And Elena makes you happy. We can see it." "She makes all of us happy," Clara added. She turned to Elena, her small face solemn. "You won't leave us, will you? Even if Papa makes you mad sometimes, because he can be very stubborn." Elena laughed, the sound bubbling up from pure joy. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara. Your Papa would have to do something truly terrible to make me leave, and even then, I'd probably just stomp around being angry for a while before forgiving him." "What if he forgets your birthday?" Clara pressed. "The last lady got really mad when Papa forgot her birthday." "Then I'll remind him ahead of time," Elena said practically. "And if he still forgets, I'll bake my own cake and make him feel guilty by being gracious about it." Marcus groaned. "I'm never going to forget your birthday. When is it?" "March 15th, Elena said with a grin. "You have 5 months to remember." "March 15th, Marcus repeated seriously. "I'm writing it down. Multiple places. Samuel will remind me if I forget." "I'll remind you too," Owen volunteered. "Every day for a week before." The easy banter, the laughter, the feeling of being a real family instead of just people living in the same house. It was everything Elena had hoped for and more. She made breakfast while Marcus helped the twins get dressed, and when they all sat down to eat together, the atmosphere was lighter than it had been since she'd arrived. After breakfast, Marcus announced he had to ride into town for supplies. "Come with me," he said to Elena, low enough that only she could hear. "I want people to see us together. Start getting used to the idea." Elena's stomach fluttered with nervousness. The town. The place where she'd been auctioned off like cattle less than 2 months ago. The people who'd watched her humiliation, who'd known her father's debts and her desperation. What would they say when they saw her returning as Marcus Hale's intended? "I don't know if that's a good idea," she said hesitantly. "People talk. They'll have opinions about us." "Let them talk," Marcus said firmly, echoing her own words from the day before. "You're not that desperate girl on the platform anymore, Elena. You're a strong woman who's earned her place here. And anyone who doesn't see that can answer to me." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her brave. "All right, I'll come." Samuel agreed to watch the twins, who were disappointed not to come along but mollified when Elena promised to bring back peppermint sticks from the general store. The ride to town took an hour, and Marcus spent most of it telling Elena stories about the ranch's early days, about building the house log by log, about the first winter when he'd nearly frozen to death in a storm and Margaret had saved him by sheer force of will. She was practical like that, he said with a small smile. No patience for dramatic suffering. She'd tell me to stop being foolish and get myself inside where it was warm. I think that's what I loved most about her. She kept me grounded. "I'm not very practical," Elena admitted. "I tend to feel things too deeply, get carried away by emotion." "I know," Marcus said, and there was affection in his voice. "That's one of the things I love about you. You feel everything so intensely, joy, sorrow, love. It's like you're fully alive in a way most people aren't. Being around you reminds me to feel things too, instead of just existing." They reached the town mid-morning when the main street was busy with people going about their business. Elena felt every eye turn toward them as they rode down the street together, saw the whispers start, the nudges and speculative looks. Marcus kept his chin high and his hand steady on the reins, radiating the quiet confidence of a man who knew his own worth and didn't care what others thought. They stopped at the general store first. Mr. Dalton, the same man who'd arranged Elena's auction, looked up from behind the counter and his eyes widened with surprise. "Marcus Hale, Miss Ward, didn't expect to see you two together." "It's just Elena," she said quietly, meeting his gaze directly. "And I'm here helping Mr. Hale with his shopping." "I see." Dalton's tone was heavy with implication. "Working out well, is it? The arrangement?" "Better than well," Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Elena's become indispensable to my household. My children adore her, and frankly, I don't know what we did before she arrived." Dalton's expression shifted, calculation moving behind his eyes. "Is that so? Well, good to hear. Some folks were wondering if she'd last longer than the others." "She's not like the others," Marcus said flatly. "Now, I need supplies, coffee, flour, sugar, beans, salt pork, and Elena would like some peppermint sticks for the children." They completed their shopping in tense silence, Dalton watching them both with undisguised curiosity. As they were leaving, he called out, "Mrs. Morrison asked after you last week, Elena. Said to tell you she's sorry about how things turned out, with your father's debts and all." Elena paused at the door, her spine straightening. Mrs. Morrison had been one of her mother's friends, before the debts made friendship complicated. "Tell her I'm doing well. Better than I ever expected, actually. And thank her for her concern." Outside, Marcus loaded the supplies into the wagon while Elena waited, very aware of the stares from passers-by. An older woman she didn't recognize stopped and looked her up and down with obvious disapproval. "You're the Ward girl, aren't you? The one who got herself sold?" "I am," Elena said quietly, refusing to be ashamed. "And now you're keeping house for Marcus Hale? Bold of you, considering the circumstances." Before Elena could respond, Marcus appeared at her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "Elena is more than my housekeeper. She's the woman I'm courting, with intentions toward marriage. I'd appreciate it if the town treated her with the respect she deserves." The woman's mouth fell open. "Marriage? Marcus, are you sure that's... given how she came to you, given that I was privileged enough to recognize an extraordinary woman when I saw one? Yes, I'm sure." Marcus's voice was ice. "Elena saved my children's lives, brought joy back into my home, and showed me it's possible to live again after loss, so unless you have something kind to say, I'd suggest you move along." The woman huffed and hurried away, but not before Elena saw the gleam of gossip in her eyes. This story would be all over town by evening. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. People can be cruel when they don't understand. It's all right, Elena said, though her hands were shaking. You defended me. That's more than most would do. Their next stop was the church, where Marcus wanted to speak with Reverend Matthews about posting their intention to marry. Not immediately, but to give the community notice that their courtship was serious and sanctioned. Elena waited outside, not quite ready to face the Reverend who'd presided over her father's funeral and had looked at her with such pity. But the Reverend came outside anyway, drawn by curiosity or genuine care. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner, and he looked between Elena and Marcus with something like understanding. Marcus tells me you two are courting, he said to Elena. I must say, I didn't expect this development, but I've known Marcus for 10 years, and I've never seen him look the way he looks at you, like he's found something he thought was lost forever. I love him, Elena said simply, and his children. I know people will talk about how we met, but I can't change that. I can only move forward. That's all any of us can do, the Reverend said gently. Move forward with grace and faith in ourselves. Your mother, Catherine, she was a good woman. She'd be proud of how you've survived, Elena. Proud of the woman you're becoming. The unexpected kindness brought tears to Elena's eyes. Thank you, Reverend. That means more than you know. They left town shortly after, both quiet as they processed the morning's events. Elena felt raw and exposed, as if the town's judgment had scraped away a layer of her skin. But Marcus's steady presence beside her, the way he'd defended her without hesitation, helped soothe the hurt. That was harder than I expected, she admitted as the town disappeared behind them. I know, but it's done now. The town knows we're together, and anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me. Marcus reached over and took her hand. You were brave back there, holding your head high when people were staring, not apologizing for existing. I learned from the best, Elena said, squeezing his hand. A certain stubborn rancher who taught me that surviving isn't the same as living, and that sometimes you have to fight for your right to be happy. When they returned to the ranch, the twins came running out to greet them, full of questions about town and demands for their promised candy. Elena distributed the peppermint sticks while Marcus unloaded supplies, and for a while, everything was wonderfully normal. But that evening, after the children were in bed, Marcus found Elena on the porch where they'd sat the night before. He carried something in his hand, a small velvet box that made Elena's heart leap into her throat. I know we said we'd court properly, Marcus began, his voice nervous in a way she'd never heard before. I know we should take time to let people adjust to the idea. But, Elena, I'm 33 years old, and I've already wasted 2 years being half dead. I don't want to waste another day not being clear about my intentions. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious but beautiful in its simplicity. This was my grandmother's ring. Margaret wore it for a while, but it never quite fit her, so she got her own. I've been saving it, thinking maybe someday... He stopped, took a breath. Elena Ward, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking if you'll accept this ring as a promise that when we've courted properly and you're absolutely certain this is what you want, I'll ask you properly and you'll have the wedding you deserve. Will you accept my promise? Elena's vision blurred with tears. Yes. Yes, Marcus, I accept your promise. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a tenderness that spoke of forever, of home, of two broken people choosing to be whole together. The weeks that followed were a blur of happiness punctuated by hard work and the slow process of building a real relationship. Marcus courted Elena the way he'd promised, with walks around the ranch, long conversations after the children were asleep, stolen moments of affection when no one was watching. They learned each other's histories, their hopes and fears, their quirks and preferences. Elena learned that Marcus was afraid of thunderstorms because one had killed his brother, that he could play the harmonica but was too shy to do it in front of people, that he liked his coffee black and his eggs scrambled and he couldn't stand the taste of onions. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, his hope to build something that would last generations, to give his children a legacy of hard work and honest living. Marcus learned that Elena sang while she cooked, that she was terrified of spiders but would face down any other creature without flinching, that she'd taught herself to read from her mother's Bible and had a hunger for books that the ranch's small collection couldn't satisfy. He learned about her dreams too, modest dreams of a home filled with love and laughter, of children who felt safe and valued, of being part of something bigger than herself. The twins watched it all with satisfaction, occasionally inserting themselves into their father's courtship with helpful suggestions. Clara insisted that Marcus needed to bring Elena flowers at least once a week, and Owen reminded him regularly about the importance of compliments. Their interference was obvious and adorable, and both Marcus and Elena found themselves laughing more than they had in years. Winter arrived properly in late November, bringing snow that transformed the valley into a wonderland of white. The ranch work shifted to winter rhythms, feeding livestock, maintaining buildings, preparing for the hard months ahead. Elena learned to bake bread in larger quantities, to preserve meat, to manage a household that needed to be self-sufficient for weeks at a time. It was during a fierce snowstorm in early December that Clara made her announcement at dinner. "Papa, when you and Elena get married, will she be our real mother?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus set down his fork carefully, glancing at Elena before answering. "What do you think about that, Clara?" "I think," Clara's small face scrunched up with concentration, "I think Mama will always be our mother in heaven. We'll always love her and remember her. But Elena is our mother here on earth. She takes care of us and loves us and stays, even when we're difficult. That makes her our real mother, too. Is that okay?" Owen nodded vigorously. "It's more than okay. We already told Elena we love her. We want her to be our mother for real, with a wedding and everything." Marcus's eyes were suspiciously bright. "If that's what you want, and if Elena agrees, then yes. She'll be your mother in every way that matters." "I do agree," Elena said softly, reaching across the table to take both children's hands. "I would be honored to be your mother. Not to replace the mother you lost, but to be the mother you have now. To love you and guide you and be here for you, always." Clara launched herself from her chair and into Elena's arms, sobbing with happiness and relief. Owen followed more quietly, but his tears were just as real. Marcus wrapped his arms around all three of them, and for a long moment they stayed that way, a family forged not by blood alone but by choice and love and the determination to heal together. That night, after the children were finally settled and sleeping peacefully, Marcus and Elena returned to their spot on the porch despite the cold. Snow fell gently around them, muffling all sound, creating a world that felt small and intimate and perfect. "I think it's time," Marcus said quietly. "We've courted for nearly 6 weeks. The children want this. The town's had time to adjust, and He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I don't want to wait anymore, Elena. I want you to be my wife. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, raise those children together, grow old on this ranch with you by my side. Will you marry me? Truly and completely, not as a promise but as a vow." Elena had known this moment was coming, had imagined it 100 times. But the reality of it, the earnest hope in Marcus's eyes, the weight of the ring on her finger, the knowledge that saying yes meant forever, took her breath away. "Yes," she said, the word coming out as barely more than a whisper. "Yes, Marcus. I'll marry you. Today, tomorrow, whenever you want. Just yes." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, a kiss that promised everything they'd been holding back during their proper courtship. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless and laughing. "How about Christmas?" Marcus suggested. "That gives us 2 weeks to prepare, to let people know, to make it official." "Christmas," Elena agreed, "a new beginning for all of us." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Samuel and the ranch hands built additional furniture for the house, understanding without being told that Elena would be moving into Marcus's room after the wedding. The twins helped Elena sew a proper dress. Nothing fancy, just a simple cream-colored gown that made her feel beautiful. Marcus rode to town multiple times, arranging for the Reverend to perform the ceremony at the ranch, inviting the few friends and neighbors he genuinely cared about. On Christmas Eve, Elena stood in her small room for the last time, looking at herself in the mirror. The girl who'd stood on the auction platform 4 months ago was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth, who'd fought for her place in the world and won. Her hair was pinned up with wildflowers Samuel had somehow procured despite the season. The ring on her finger caught the lamplight, glinting like a promise kept. A soft knock at the door announced Clara and Owen, both dressed in their best clothes, their faces shining with excitement. "You look beautiful," Clara breathed. "Like a princess, but better because you're real." "Are you ready?" Owen asked. "Papa's waiting downstairs, and he looks really nervous." Elena laughed, her own nervousness evaporating. "I'm ready. Let's not keep him waiting." They descended the stairs together, the twins leading the way. The main room had been transformed. Candles everywhere, pine boughs decorating the mantel, the furniture rearranged to create a makeshift aisle. The ranch hands stood along the walls, dressed in their finest, their rough faces softened with genuine happiness. Samuel waited by the fireplace, a rare smile creasing his weathered features. And at the front, standing beside Reverend Matthews, was Marcus. He'd shaved and trimmed his hair, wore a suit that must have been buried in a trunk for years. But what struck Elena most was his expression. He wasn't just happy. He was radiant, transformed by joy in a way she'd never seen before. When he saw her, his eyes filled with tears that he didn't bother to hide. Elena walked toward him with Clara and Owen on either side, and she realized this was exactly right. Not a traditional wedding with a father giving her away, but a ceremony where she walked freely, flanked by the children who'd chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. When she reached Marcus, he took her hands in his grip warm and solid and real. Reverend Matthews began the ceremony, but Elena barely heard the words. All her attention was fixed on Marcus, on the way he was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Do you, Marcus James Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Marcus said firmly, his voice clear and certain. "With everything I have and everything I am." "And do you, Elena Catherine Ward, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Elena smiled through her tears. "I do, completely and forever." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." Marcus pulled her close and kissed her with a passion that made several ranch hands whistle and whoop. Elena kissed him back, not caring who was watching, celebrating the impossible miracle of this moment. When they finally broke apart, Clara and Owen were hugging their legs, laughing and crying at the same time. "You're really married," Clara exclaimed. "You're really our mother now." "I really am," Elena confirmed, crouching down to pull both children close. "I'm your mother, and your father is my husband, and we're a family. A real, true, forever family." The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Samuel had somehow managed to prepare a feast: roasted meat, vegetables, fresh bread, and a cake that was slightly lopsided but delicious. The ranch hands took turns offering toasts, their rough words made tender by genuine affection for the couple. Even some of the neighbors who'd come spoke kindly, their initial skepticism apparently overcome by the obvious love between Marcus and Elena. As the evening wore on and the guests began to leave, the twins were finally put to bed despite their protests that they wanted to stay up all night celebrating. Elena tucked them in, kissing both their foreheads. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she whispered, "for not giving up on me even when you wanted to, for choosing to love me." "We loved you before Papa did," Clara said sleepily. "We knew you were special from the beginning. We just had to make sure you'd stay." "I'm staying," Elena promised. "Forever and always, I'm staying." When she returned downstairs, she found Marcus banking the fire, the house finally quiet. He looked up as she approached, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. It was desire and love and gratitude all mixed together, and it was directed entirely at her. "Hello, wife," he said softly. "Hello, husband," she replied, her heart full to bursting. He crossed to her and swept her into his arms, carrying her toward their bedroom, no longer his alone, but theirs. "I love you, Elena Hale. I loved you when I saw you on that platform, even though I didn't recognize it. I loved you when you fought death for my children. I loved you when you called me on my grief and demanded I live again. And I'll love you every day for the rest of my life. I love you too, Elena said, her arms around his neck. You saved me, Marcus. Not just from Morrison or the auction, but from a life without purpose or joy. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to wake up grateful every morning. We saved each other, Marcus corrected, echoing her words from months ago. And now we get to live the life we've built together. Later, lying in the darkness with Marcus's arms around her and the sound of the children sleeping peacefully down the hall, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here. The auction block had felt like the end of everything, her dignity, her future, her very self. She'd thought she was being sold into servitude, into a life of mere survival. Instead, she'd found everything she'd never known to look for. A man whose broken heart matched her own. Children who needed her as much as she needed them. A purpose that went beyond simply existing. She thought about the girl she'd been 4 months ago, standing on that platform with her spine straight and her hope dying. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, that she'd be loved, cherished, chosen, would that girl have believed her? Probably not. But that was the beauty of it. Sometimes the best things in life came from the most unlikely places, from moments of desperation that transformed into moments of grace. What are you thinking about? Marcus murmured, his breath warm against her hair. How far we've come, Elena said softly. How different everything is from what I expected. Better or worse? So much better, better than I ever dreamed possible. She turned in his arms to face him, even though she could barely see him in the darkness. I was sold at 18 to a lonely rancher. But his children loved me before he did, and that made all the difference. It gave me time to prove myself, to show that I was worth keeping, and in the end, we all chose each other. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Marcus kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. You're the bravest person I know, Elena. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into something beautiful. You refused to be broken by circumstances, and instead you broke through to all of us. We're all brave, Elena corrected. You, for letting yourself love again after loss. The children, for risking their hearts one more time. Me, for believing I deserved a family of my own. We're all brave together. Outside, snow continued to fall on the ranch, on the barn where Elena had first found her footing, on the pastures where Marcus had first confessed his feelings, on the house that had become their home. Inside, 4 people slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and chosen and safe. Elena Ward, now Elena Hale, drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, grateful beyond measure for the unexpected journey that had brought her here. She'd been sold at auction, yes. She'd been desperate and alone and frightened. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd found her people, her place, her purpose. She'd built a family from broken pieces, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the hardest soil. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, ranch work and child rearing and the daily labor of building a life together. But whatever came, they'd face it as a family, chosen, cherished, and completely whole. And that, Elena thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was the greatest gift of all. Not perfection, but the perfect imperfection of real love, real family, real life. The story that had begun on an auction block in August ended on a snowy Christmas night in December with a woman who'd learned that being sold didn't mean being worthless, that desperation could transform into hope, and that sometimes you had to lose everything to find what you'd been searching for all along. Her spine was still straight, just as her mother had taught her. But now she stood tall not in defiance of her circumstances, but in celebration of everything she'd overcome and everyone she'd become along the way. Home at last, in every sense of the word.